Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is David Barron, and we are talking about replanting with purpose, a new start for dying churches. David, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Thank you, Dr. Gray, for having me.
Yeah, let me tell you about David. David Barron serves as co-executive director of the Central Kentucky Network of Baptists, where he focuses on church health and revitalization. He previously led a revitalization effort at Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Woodford County and has served in youth, collegiate, and music ministry roles. David, you have a great diversity of abilities. David holds degrees from Asbury University and Southern Seminary and has been married to his wife, Natalie, for 23 years. They have three sons, Tate, Garrett, and Ian, and David is an avid runner about to go into a 50-mile race, which just sounds horrible to me, but I'm glad he's prepared for it and excited about it. So let's jump right into these questions, brother. Tell us, David, how you felt called into ministry and then how you ended up in the position that you're in now.
Yeah, certainly. I tell a lot of people I took the Jonah route. When I was about 17 years old, I believe, looking back on my life, God really called me into ministry then, and I didn't think God knew what he was doing. And so I told him no, and spent the next 10 years trying to live the way I wanted to live. So at about when I was 27, I finally surrendered to ministry, to full-time ministry. At that time, I did not have any collegiate. I just thought I'd be a blue-collar worker, working blue-collar jobs the rest of my life, and that's where God was going to lead me. And so surrendered to ministry at 27, began my collegiate career, worked my way through an associate's degree through BCTC in business management. God really provided that in a number of ways. Finished that off at Asbury through their adult education program, and so I got my bachelor's of business through Asbury. Left straight out of that, graduated in May, went right to Southern in August, and started working on my MDiv at that time, and graduated 5 years later with an MDiv from Southern with a church leadership emphasis. And so during that time of going through and trying to figure out where I was serving, as you heard, I served in many different lay capacities within the church, wherever God would allow me to serve and wherever I could be best fit for his kingdom. While I was going to Southern, I wound up taking a position at Mount Vernon Baptist, became their senior pastor there. There was a revitalization project. There was a few people that were there, about 30 when I took the role, and was able to help them work through some structural things, some vision things, able to be with them for almost 7 years, about 6.5 years. Suffered through COVID with everybody, trying to figure out what those next steps were and how are we going to come through the other end. And then God opened the opportunity during that time of serving as their pastor. I was had served as the president-elect, the president, and then the affiliation specialist with the Central Kentucky Network of Baptists. And through that process of getting to know Brother Stokes and the other people there that were serving, I was able to, they had invited me to come on staff full-time. Started off as the network ministry director, then the associate director, and now I've been serving this past year and moving into next year as the co-executive director alongside Brother Stokes.
You and David Stokes seem to fit well together. He's a gifted leader and thinks outside the box, and you seem to kind of fall right in that same lane with him. So you guys are just a real blessing to your association. Hey, I had a follow-up question. So what year did you graduate from Southern, David?
2017.
Okay.
So I graduated December of 2017. I started in my church in 2015 as the senior pastor.
Yeah.
And so did those things alongside of each other. Right before I turned 40, I spent a long time so trying to go from no education to a master's. It took me about 12 years of constant schoolwork.
You know, you can feel like when you're in that situation, you can feel like you're kind of behind other people. But my observation has been that that's not really the case. What you're learning theologically and through formal education, you had learned another part through just working for a living and just get out and doing a job. Was that your story?
That's right. You know, I laugh. What the Lord was doing in the meantime while I was working a secular job, I was actually working for a large company, doing training and development, responsibility of training 200 different employees, implementing some systems, with no power and no authority to do any of it. I couldn't make anybody go. I couldn't make anybody change, but I was responsible for all that change, right? Sounds a lot like ministry.
You were pastoring a church. Yeah,
I was
that's
pastoring
right.
a church.
Or leading an association, same thing.
And so I went into that, and then was able, going into the ministry, began to take even the theological education I was getting at that time, and then the practical sides of leadership within the church, just putting all that together, and the things they don't teach you at seminary, right? We hear those jokes all the time. Well, I never learned that in seminary. They didn't teach me that process. And so I spent a lot of time. The church was very gracious to me, a young guy in his 30s, trying to lead his first church, making changes, trying to understand when, how, what. And they were very gracious. I love them. They still hold a special place in my heart. That's a picture of the church, if you can see it behind me. At least part of it. They've been a super influential and gracious a congregation in my life.
Yeah, well, good job on having that first education before you went for the second one. And there's no way to place a value on what you learn from having to lead people without a position of authority, and to work through conflict stuff, develop programs, training, and the like. Practice presenting, realize you're probably not coming across very well. You need to sharpen your skills.
That's right.
I mean, my goodness, what a preparation. Well, David, we're talking about replanting, and church replanting in particular. That's a foreign term to a lot of people. Some folks have never even heard of church planting, and so replanting is an additional level of misunderstanding. What does it mean to replant a church?
I think it's great you asked the question, that you look for the definitions, because I find a lot of times that definitions, I mean, they matter. And a lot of people don't know, and they hear the terms, and because they sound similar, they think they're the same thing. And there's a lot of things that you have to consider when you go through that. And if I was to tell you a very simple and basic definition, and I mean, we could talk about a lot of nuances, because there could be nuances there. But I think one of the things that you have to do and make sure when you replant a church, it is something old that has passed away and something new that has begun. And so when you think of replanting, something old has passed away. It's no longer there. It's something different. It's no longer being utilized in the same way, and a new work has begun that's there. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between revitalization and replanting here in just a little bit. And I don't want to spoil too much of that information.
So, David, when you're having a conversation with a church, I'm assuming you use that very clear descriptor. There's a funeral and a birth on that. And do you find it helpful that when you use that really clear, straightforward language, something old has passed away, something new has begun? Does that help people begin to process that there really is a death of a current existence that's required before this new birth, this new church? Is it helpful to begin to think in those terms? Does it help them begin to grieve, maybe, and to say, okay, this is not just changing a few things?
Yeah, it really is. And you've got to be careful about how quickly you use that term and how fast, because while we may have an idea in our own minds of where this may be going, we're really seeking God's will. What does He desire for this church? And so you have to help them come along. And so you begin to talk about, what does this look like? And maybe it begins through conversations of partnership and what partnership could look like. And partnership has many, many different avenues and nuances that no two partnerships are the same. Every church that goes through a partnership with another one has different levels and different requirements and different expectations, and so you begin to talk through those levels. But then you may talk about, well, what does a replant look like? What does a merger look like? What does a gospel legacy look like in these cases? And so sometimes we want to help establish that conversation gently and easy, because it's not an easy conversation.
Right.
You got people that have served in churches for generations, and some of them have spent 30, 40. I've even met people that spent 70 years in the same church. And so when you begin to talk about, the ending of something and the beginning of something else new, it is a grieving process that they have to go through, and they really have to begin to think through, God, what are you calling me? What are you calling me to be a part of? What do you really want? And am I really trying to hold on to my church and this position? And why am I here? Or am I here to make my preferences and this to be my church? Or Lord, am I here to make your name known? And so when we can help them see that there may be an ending, but it's not the end. It's a new beginning. It's a chance to continue a gospel presence, to continue the gospel legacy, and to do the thing that you really started going to church for the first time, and go back to your first love, and that's to make Jesus' name known.
Yeah. I want to follow up with you on your obvious passion about replanting. But before that, you mentioned revitalization. What's your definition of revitalization? So what's the difference between a replant? I think I understand the answer versus a revitalization.
Yeah. So when you think of revitalization, right? This is where you got to think. This would mean a pastor who is leading a church through change with existing people under current structures, meaning their bylaws, their constitution, their church history, in order to bring about change and health in the church. Right. So this could be the same pastor who's been there for 20 years or 30 years, or a new pastor who's come in. No matter, it's a pastor working under the existing structure that is there to bring a church back to a healthy place. And so when you talk about replanting, in most cases it's not always a new pastor, but in a lot of cases it is a new pastor coming with new people, along with the existing people in some cases that may stay and remain a part of the process or the project, implementing a new structure, under a new constitution, new bylaws, to bring about the health of the church, and celebrating and building upon the history of the church that had been there previously. So the previous church would cease to operate under its old constitution, under its old bylaws and leadership structure, and a new name, a new structure, a new leadership, bylaws, and those things would be birthed to bring about a healthy, vibrant congregation in that community and in that location. And so the part of the a part of that is also building upon the history that a church, that a pastor has. They're building upon the history that was there before them. It's with planting, there is no history. If you're planting a new church, there's no one before you. There's nothing that you can look back upon. There's nothing for you to celebrate. This is a completely new work. With replanting, there's a history that you can celebrate, a legacy of the church that was there before, of the gospel ministry, of the faithful service that they had for sometimes decades or centuries.
Yeah, and so then a revitalization, if a replant is something old has passed away, something new has begun, then I would think a revitalization, the way I'm hearing you describe it, is something struggling has come back to life, and the
Right.
goal of a replant is to bring health. Well, that's exciting. So let's talk about replanting. You have an obvious passion, David, to see churches replanted. Where did that come from? That desire to see that happen, especially right here in Kentucky?
Well, I think that. I think there's a great need here in our state, and not just in our state, but around our nation, and even around the world. There are many, as I said, there's many congregations that have served in communities faithfully for decades and even centuries, who have come to a season in the life of their church where they are just not physically and financially and maybe even spiritually able to continue the work in that place. And a church could decide that they want to sell their building. They want to donate all the money to missions, which would be a noble cause, and we would, for them to be able to take a large sum of money and give it to a missions organization or some missionaries. But the issue is we don't want to lose a gospel light in a community. And we understand that God has placed those churches in those places for a particular reason. And that they need to be there. They need to share the gospel with the people that are around them. And they've just lost their season of effectiveness, and we need to help bring that back. And yet we see the churches that are closing, and yet churches that are, and then we have planters and replanters that are trying to bring new life into churches and plant. Scott County is where I live. It's been one of the fastest growing communities, and yet in Scott County, there's in the last 20 years, there's really only been like 2 church plants in 20 years that I can think of, and yet we need more of that, because we can't even house all the people if we wanted to. But when a church closes and they sell their building and it's lost and it's turned into some commercial property, or it's turned into pubs, or it's turned into museums or art galleries or whatever it may be, the issue is the church planter and the church replanter couldn't afford to even to build a building half the size of what that church is. I just come back from Scotland with 20 schemes, and was seeing all the work that they're doing over there. And you can walk around the city of Edinburgh and you can see churches. And I took pictures of 40 or 50 churches, and could have took twice as many. And these are buildings that are no longer used to the glory of God. They were, one was I have a picture that is now the Beerstein Horror Pub. It's a church. It was a church building, and now it's a horror pub. There was ones that were retirement flats. They had converted it for people to live in retirement. There are senior living units. It was you name it. It was being used for it. And yet the people in Scotland, the guys that are trying to plant churches there, are having to buy government buildings or storefronts within strip malls in order to be able to hold a church with limited space and limited ability to do all the ministry that they needed. And so we need churches that are looking at very serious financial, spiritual challenges to say, we want to keep a gospel legacy in this place. And we know that while we may not be able to do it, somebody else can. And so we need them to be able to take their ability and think gospel, think long term. Lord, how would you have us use this facility long after we're here, so that a gospel presence can continue? Because we know that these guys that are coming in, they don't have $1 million or $2 million to build a building. And so they need an opportunity of a church to say, here, you take the baton, you carry the torch, you be the light in this community from this point on. And so I think as we look at that in and around Kentucky and in and around our nation, we have to help our churches have a legacy and kingdom mindset when it comes to their property.
David, what are some signs that a church needs to consider replanting?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I wish I could tell you like that every church has a definitive sign and a definitive moment. But here's the thing. So I lead the Barnabas team with our network. We meet with churches. We help walk through some things with them. And the things that we tend to look at the spiritual condition of the church. We look at the morale of the church. We look at the physical condition of the members and of the facility. We look at their financial condition. So when we look at the spiritual condition, we're trying to help understand: do they have a passion to reach people outside their 4 walls, or are they only looking internally? Is there a clear vision and mission and ministry that the church is actively living out? Are they united or are they divided? Is there a humility and a willingness for the church to see God glorified no matter the cost or change that they're holding on to? They're holding on to history. Are they holding on to their history and forgotten about that really it's about his story, right? It's about Christ's story, not about their history. And so we want to see where are they living that out? Are the members physically capable of doing the work that's going to be needed to help turn around? I'll just give you an example. We talked to a church one time. There was 18 members in the church, $18,000 in the bank, and in an area that was able and ripe for the gospel. And most of the members were over the age of 70, and they just said, we're we've served here for a long time and we're
Yep.
tired. And it's not that we don't want to work here. It's just that we're not physically capable of doing this, but we know somebody is. And so we look at that. And then what is the financial condition? Can they carry it on? A big challenge that our churches face anymore is that the boomer and builder generations are some of the greatest givers. The silent generation are the greatest givers to the church, and yet we know that there is a challenge with younger people who have not been discipled as much as they're coming into the church to give at the same rate. And so churches are just finding financial realities that hey, we're one air conditioning unit. We're one roof repair. We're one major catastrophe from our church, from us having to spend all of our reserves, and we won't have enough money to carry on any ministry or even maybe pay our staff. And so we look at those things and help a church understand to rightly divide where are you at? What are the next steps? What is feasible for you? And is there a potential or a time frame? Sometimes we can look and see, hey, if you continue on the path that you're going in 3, 5, 7 years, if things don't change, you're going to come to a point to where your church is no longer able to keep the lights on. And so what we desire is to help find those churches. We would rather be the 5 to 7 to 10 years out so that they have time to make the necessary adjustments, to know, to recast vision, to engage their community again so that church doesn't close in that location. But oftentimes we get a call. I tell people they call us when they're ready for hospice care. To come and help them die gracefully so that they can leave a gospel legacy. And we would rather them not call, we'll take that phone call and we'll help them do that. But man, we would love to serve them well way before they would have to make that call and maybe keep the doors open and bringing God glory for a lot longer period of time.
David, this question could be answered from lots of different perspectives, but what have you found to be the biggest challenge when leading a replant? Either the challenge for the replanter or the challenge for a church accepting that really is their best option for viability?
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, working on, sort of behind the scenes, being the person who's having to initiate or having these conversations with individual. I think the biggest challenge is helping people to let go and to see that the work that they have done over the years is not for nothing.
Yep.
That their goal was never to make a name for themselves or for their church, but their goal was to make much of Jesus. And so they've not been a failure. That is not for, those are things of helping people come to grips, because that's, my mom is been serving in her church for many years, and she's a good, godly lady. I thank the Lord for her and the influence she's had in my life. And we've had some conversations, and she said, it must be hard to talk to people after they serve so long and them not feel like things are a failure. And I'm like, you're right. And we have to remind them of that they're not a failure. It's that failure is closing the doors and doing nothing. To see that there is a chance for God to continue work beyond them, and that it doesn't have to be about them, but it can be about God and about bringing glory to his church. And so just helping people let go and to redefine success in many ways, that they've been successful for many years.
And David, I'm hearing in you a real earnestness to want to honor the legacy of that church, to help them understand it's a noble thing that you've existed this long, you've reached out this long, and it's also noble to say we've fulfilled our purpose here. It's time for someone else to come and use this facility. And what a gift they're giving for a building that's paid for, some work that could be done, and a fresh work to happen.
Yeah, and to be able to do that, and the next church that's going to come in to honor that legacy, and there's practical ways to do that. You can put one section of your hallway and pictures and stories, and or maybe it's a room. I know that's there are guys that are probably shaking their head going, I don't need another room with a plaque on it, right? I get it. Like
Yeah, it's
nobody
worthwhile
wants to
though.
clean out the silk flower room that's in memory of Sister Betty Joe, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
get that. But there is ways that you want to honor that history, to point back
Sure.
that we're here and able, that we're building upon the foundation. Paul
Yeah.
says, I don't like I'm building upon the foundations of the apostles. I'm standing upon those who have come before me, and we're able to do the work that's there. Of honoring that in your services, and any time that you get a chance to celebrate, especially in those early years of the transition, of looking at individuals who may have stuck around, who have went through the hard decisions, who are still attending that church, and saying it's because of your courageous decisions as a member of the previous congregation that we're able to do this today. It's because of the sacrifices that you've made that we're able to stand here, and we're to have these baptisms, that we're adding people to this congregation, that we're investing in this school that's across the street, that we're investing into this part of our community. It's because of that financial sacrifice that the previous people before us, and to have the courageousness of the pastor to stand and proclaim that. And yet we know it's only through God and through his glory and through his kindness that we're able to do that. In all those situations, he's allowed that church to pass on. He's allowed you to minister, and he's opened the doors for you to be in that community. And so we have to find practical, simple solutions to honor and glorify not only what God is doing, but what those who have went before us have done.
David, do you have a story of a success story of a church replant that is now thriving?
Yeah, there are within our association, and I know, Dr. Gray, you could probably tell way more stories than I could across all of Kentucky. But it's First Baptist Danville, who is now part of Ashland Avenue out of
Yep.
Lexington. That's a story that we could look at. Ashland Community Church
Yep.
in Danville. There was a church plant that had been going for several years that they were able to help come along and take over and close that plant, but then relaunch as a new beginning. They're now running over 600 people on a Sunday. I think Danville was gone from about 90 to about 150. Porter Jessamine Station, Brookside
Hmm.
Baptist,
Yep.
closed their doors, gifted their property to Porter Memorial. So Porter Jessamine Station and Brian Watts is there. They're now running about 100 people on a Sunday. So they went from under 20 to now over 100. I know Brian is celebrated just about 1 year there. Emmanuel Baptist out of Lexington,
Yeah.
with Victory Baptist, when they closed, that campus now is now running 2 services. Cornerstone on Winchester Road that closed. That Mackie Gaskin, who is now the pastor there, they went from under 50 to now they're running over, I think, 125 or 130, if I get the numbers right. We'll consider it preacher math.
Sure.
I'll give them more than what they need. We'll just call it 150, right? So, but those are churches that are being intentional about, hey, we need to raise up leaders, and I think that's what it's going to need. There's a shortage of churches. I know there is a shortage of time of churches and leadership to be able to do this. If you want to believe the Lifeway numbers of 85% are plateaued or declining,
Yep.
you can take the tail end of that, and you can say there's 10 to 20% of our churches that are within striking distance of closing their doors in the next 5 years. 10 to 20%. And yet we know that there's not 10 to 20% ready to take them over at the top
Hmm.
of that level. So we need more churches that are strategically thinking through how to raise up leaders, how to take them
Good.
apart, not just our large churches.
Yeah.
In 20 schemes, those churches are under 100 people, and they're raising up and planting and sending out. They're sending 20 and 30 people out of their 70-member congregations. We need our normative-sized churches raising up leaders and sending them out to bring health back to other congregations.
Yeah, great reminder. David, I know you have a world of resources that can be helpful, and I think we'll list some of those probably on the comments. Is there one book in particular that kind of comes to mind that could help a pastor who's thinking about replanting, or maybe a church leader that wants to help their church think about maybe we should replant?
Yeah, so it really just depends on which direction you're coming from.
Hmm.
So if you're the church that's struggling and you're thinking, hey, maybe we need to be replanted, I would tell you to look through Maybe there's a book that Mark Halleck put out with NAM called The Replant Roadmap. Church Mergers is by Rick Curtis. That book came out, I would tell you to take as they talk about the challenges and the struggles that come along with those things. Mark Clifton's book, Reclaiming Glory, gives you the heart and the passion about why it's needed. If you're a pastor that is going to do the replanting, not only would I encourage you to read those books, but There's Hope for Your Church by Gary McIntosh. Dr. Orr's book, Leading Major Change.
Mm-hmm.
The book that he wrote, like that book is one that he wrote based after reading Managing Transition by William Bridges. Bridges is the thought process behind it. Dr. Orr is the actual, this is how we did it. Stephen Covey's The Speed of Trust. Todd Bolsinger's Canoeing the Mountains. Those guys, there's a ton of resources towards leadership that guys need to be reading. I read a lot. I read typically about 20 to 25 books a year. I go through different seasons. Sometimes I read a lot for a little while, and then I get busy and I don't pick a book up for a few weeks. But
I mean, you got a 50-mile race you've got to get ready for, David. You can't read all the time.
Audiobooks, those count, brother. Those count. So.
All right. Well, man, thank you so much. I love this conversation. It's so important. And David, from my experience, it seems like a church needs to start having this conversation about 3 years before they're ready, so they can just kind of grieve and get to that place where they can make the decision. So this platform is called Leadership Lessons. What is one leadership lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
Man, leadership capital. Okay. Understanding my leadership capital. We don't know early on, you don't know how to spend it or when to spend it. And there were times that I overspent the capital that I had and I made mistakes and I did things I shouldn't do. And then there were times where I didn't think I had the capital in place to make a change or do something. And I didn't make the change, and therefore I underspent, and I should have done things earlier, and I lost momentum. And so sometimes a church is ready for change, and we're sort of hesitant as pastors because we don't think that they are, and yet we stifle the momentum. And then there's times where we think, oh, the church is ready for this, and then we overspent, and it's that. So learning how to spend my leadership capital is and it's still an ongoing process of knowing when, how, and where to make changes. It's often been a lesson that I'm learning the hard way.
Have you benefited, David, from having someone from the outside help you think through some of those decisions where you just say, I'm just not sure if I'm at the place to lead this change right now? Has coaching benefited you, or just, I mean, you've worked with David Stokes. I'm sure he's been a person who's spoken into your life.
That's right. Yeah. And I would say, just as a pastor, before I worked with David Stokes, like he was right. He's the guy that I turned to, and he's the guy that would help me think through. And so this is a plug for your AMSs, right? Go. These guys are experts in their field, and they are guys that can help you think through, and they can be that sounding board. If you don't have a plurality of elders and a multitude of guys around, your AMS can be somebody that can help you. And so that was such a benefit to me to have other guys that would speak into my life. Now, you can't have 15 of those guys speaking into you, and you just can't be trying to search for the guy. And I know people do that. They look for somebody until they give them the answer they want. But you got to have people who are speaking into your life and that you're willing and able to trust and listen to them to help them think through what's going on in their life. And so I'm grateful. I've got some good pastors that have spoken into my life that have helped me think through that. My own pastor, Andy Waldrop, continues to be a great resource for me. Even though we're the same age, he's still got lots of godly wisdom that he pours into me. David Stokes has been a blessing to me in my life for many years. There is just opportunities, and again, your AMSs, and even your regional consultants at the KBC. If you don't have, let those guys minister to you and guide and direct you, and it is such a benefit to you, so that you know that you're not, maybe it'll help you make a decision or keep from making a mistake.
Well, brother, I'm grateful you're in a position to provide that for people now. When you go talk with a pastor, you don't have an axe to grind or a dog in the fight. You're just there for that person's well-being. And so I'm grateful God's put you there. David, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your heart for churches, your desire to see churches replanted. And thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Man, thank you for having me. If anybody needs my help, I'm sure they can find me on the CKMB website.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons. An audio podcast of this program is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. The Kentucky Baptist Convention was created by churches for churches to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Christ. For more information about the KBC and the cooperative program which fuels our ministry, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time.